Well, if you've found me again on either my website or on YouTube or Facebook, this reflection is the third part of the random thoughts and ramblings of an old man on prayer, and probably conclude and then bring it up again at some other point. While living in New York City, and if you've been following me along, that's really where I learned to pray. I mentioned it was in that noisy environment that God led me into this place of prayer, and then how to live it out for the next 40 years. And while attending seminary, I took courses with the Center for Christian Spirituality, which still exists. It's on the grounds of the seminary. It was separate from the seminary, but you could take courses and get credit. And there, people study what's called aesthetical theology, or the study of prayer. And I never really, believe it or not, got a good grade in the academic parts of prayer. A couple of A's, mostly B's. So I tell people that my prayer life is a B plus, which is actually pretty good. I think if you got an A in prayer, you'd have to take courses in humility. But in my second year of seminary, I broke from the traditional coursework. The seminary is offering a program in connection with other seminaries in the city called ISTEM, Inter-Seminary Theological Education and Ministry. And the program was designed so that learning took place not in the classroom, but contextually. In other words, you were going to do ministry in the city of New York, in a church, and then you would get together with other students and discuss what was happening and what insights you got about urban ministry. So I was assigned to a very small church in Jersey City, which is just across the bridge from Manhattan. And every day I had to take the subway and then a bus to get there, and I was dropped off right in front of the church. And this church had been there for years and years, ministering to this community, mostly immigrant community. Now, I still lived at the seminary, and Chapel of the Good Shepherd and my living room were a home base for my B plus prayer life. And I still had regular classes, not as many, and I focused there on the sacraments and prayer. But I also had this assignment. And so I was having to live a very hectic schedule. And then I was working as a student working, still had a child, still married. And here I was now, thankfully, in the midst of the city. In fact, it was located in a part of Jersey City that had undergone massive demographic transformation. What was once a large Italian immigrant community was now a community where the majority of the population were Latino. This has since changed even. If you ever go to New York changes all the time. But it has changed, and now it's a very wealthy population of New Yorkers who have moved from Manhattan Island over to Jersey City. So rather than being the view, they look at the view. And they have high-rise apartments along the river. Now, how do you pray? The question was, how do you pray in a noisy place, also with a busy life? And that question now became even more intense, seeing I was outside of the cloistered academic, everybody's a seminarian, bells ringing, calling you to prayer. Now, Dr. Alan Jones, who was with the Center for Christian Spirituality, a great man who wrote a book called Journey into Christ, once suggested, as I was talking to him, he was my mentor, spiritual guide in some ways. He said, what you need to do is get on the subway, and as you ride along, close your eyes and listen. Just listen to the noise of the tracks, listen to the noise of the people, listen to the noise of the doors opening and shutting. Try to listen to the voice, that if you've ever ridden the subways where there's usually a recording and they tell you what's next stop and the stop after, but you can't understand them because it's all static. And so you're never sure when or where to get off. And Most New Yorkers just learn it by practice. And then he said, after an extended period of time, I want you to open your eyes and look at what's around you, at the surroundings that you had been listening to, and take in as much as you can, and then begin to pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, holy is your name. What happened? What happened to me the first time was, I don't know how to describe it. It was intense. The memory of it is still there. As I was looking at all these people, diverse, some going to work, some mothers with children, street people, homeless, riding the subway. What first hit me was the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Remember, the crowds had followed Jesus. They'd been with him all day. They were from distant places, and they were hungry. And there they were. And it says in Matthew's gospel recorded, it says, Jesus looked out on the crowd, and he had compassion on them, for they were sheep without a shepherd. Now, that word compassion is more than pity. There's some translations that say he had pity on them. And pity is really, I don't know if where you live, or I know in the United States, if you stay up late at night in the middle of the morning, these various organizations come on, and they usually show you hungry children, with dirty clothes and dirty faces, and they're in the barrios or the neighborhoods, and you are encouraged to give so much a month, and this kid will get an education, will get fed, implication, go on to graduate school, become a nuclear scientist or whatever. But it was all up to you, and it was the whole thing was to have pity, very similar to watching a commercial on cruelty to animals. They put sad puppies in front of you, and they want to pity, and that pity, they're hoping will go to compassion, but usually it doesn't. Pity just changes the station. Or pity says, I'm going to get up. That's really sad. That's really horrible. I think I'll get some popcorn and a soda and come back for the regular program. But compassion is pity, if you will, pity with feet. It calls you out of a passion. It hits you so inside. We would say, the vernacular, in the gut wrenching, so that you're moved to do something. And that's what Jesus was encountering as he looked out at these people. And it was in that moment on that subway, it was the A train to be exact, which I took because it has an express. Jesus was speaking to me. This is not a Jesus who's removed from the crowds, from the noise, even the noise in my head. It's a Jesus who's in the midst of the crowd and in the noise. And he then tells his disciples, now you pray for laborers for the harvest, to bring in the harvest, to bring that harvest, those who are out there shepherdless, into a relationship with the King and the kingdom. That's really harvesting. Prayer, again, was just being with Jesus in the time that was set apart, in the place that was set apart, with a prayer book, with devotionals, but it was really an unceasing flow from that place. It had to move out of that, where I would meet with Jesus in the life that was around me, which was to take all kinds of different forms. So that when my 2-year-old or my 3-year-old came charging into my sacred place of prayer, and with me reading my scriptures, that was not an interruption. That was also an encounter with God. It became part of my relationship with Christ. And oftentimes, and I had many stories to tell you, it became Christ who sent the little cherub to sit on my lap and to remind me of things like, blessed are the children who come unto me. The prayer is for me now became not avoiding what was around me, but what was around me was the very stuff of prayer. I don't have objections to Basil Pennington and the Trappist and that whole spirituality. It's an important part of the history of the church for 900 years plus, 1,500 years. These men had unceasingly prayed and have brought great insights for the life of the church. And but centering prayer and contemplative prayer is really not available to most of us, and it's only one means of connecting with God. And it's not the ultimate means of connecting with God. Jesus often went early in the morning to a solitary place of prayer, and I pray oftentimes that I can find that early in the morning solitary place of prayer. And it's good to go there. Jesus also, however, went daily to the synagogue and often to the temple, the place of the presence of God, which he called the house of prayer. And the zeal for that house consumed him. There was the noise of the sacrifices, the teachings of various prophets going on, the crowds gathering, the noise was constant. And it is in that place, I believe, that'll bring us to the point of service or ministry, to use a religious word. To minister to those around us who are encountering every moment of every day as we meet, as Jesus has sent us, and to treat every encounter with a person as if it's a divine appointment, meant to enhance our relationship with God. We will also discover that those around us will minister to us. And in hindsight, at the end of the day, in kind of an evening meditation or moment, we'll begin to notice how many times we encountered Christ during the day, that he's alive. We're in the midst of a pandemic right now. It isn't over. It's getting better. And I believe it will soon be declared over. The politicians need a victory right now. The experts will somehow declare that we have all reached immunity, a new word that we didn't even know about a year and a half ago. It will not be a united voice then. There will still be distractors, and it's never been a united voice, and not even for a moment. The experts, and especially the politicians who have declared themselves medical experts and epidemiologists, along with the people on social media who last year were experts in political analysis, that there'll be a voice out there, but basically that blending of medicine and science and politics that has created nothing but confusion and fear will begin to settle. And if we look out at the faces of the people around us, even our little children, and we see that fear, it's in there, we need to speak that God is with us. We need to break down the fact that the enemy has become the person next to us because the experts, particularly politicians, have told us that we don't have to, we have to separate from them. We have to avoid contact. They might kill us with their breath or with their touch. And we come into the midst of that and say, no, these are people sent by God. We're meant to be with them, and God is speaking to us through them. The shutdown that has kept us from coming together, especially for the Eucharist, has created, I fear, a real dangerous thing in the spiritual life, and that's isolation. And isolation is the enemy of mental health, and it's the enemy of spiritual health. When I was practicing psychology and somebody would come onto the wards who suffered severe depression, this is prior to the medications that we use today, the first thing that depressed person would do is want to go to bed, want to be left alone. They would want to isolate. And it became the job of the staff on the ward is to prevent them from doing that. And it caused many battles. But it was to get that person out of bed, get them walking, get them talking, get them socializing, because the isolation would kill them and the social interaction would heal them. And that's still true today, even if someone is on medication. They need to get out into community, because we live and walk with Christ and our prayer life ultimately together. Yes, we go to our quiet place. We're there. We get the right time. We get the right place. We settle in, whatever discipline or format we need. But we come there to meet Christ as he's found in the midst of life. He is with us always, even to the ends of the earth. If you leave anything from these thoughts about prayer, it's that Jesus is in the noise. He's in the noise of humanity. He's in the noise of your head. He's in the sounds of life. God bless you, and hope you come back, share another random thought with you.